Is your magic meter running low? Well, we've got a cure for you. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePauli, and today on the show, my friend Jeremy from the Mad Chatters podcast joins me to discuss the Disney afternoon as it celebrates its 30th anniversary this month. If you grew up in the 90s, you'll definitely remember the Disney afternoon shows like DuckTales, Chippendale Rescue Rangers, Goof Troop, and so many more. This syndicated television block entertained many kids after getting home from school, including me, and these days seems to be making a retro resurgence. The celebrating is coming your way right after this. The focus of the Disney afternoon was new Disney animated television shows because the company's history starts with animation. If you'd like to learn more about Disney animation, get yourself a free copy of the audiobook, Disney's 9 Old Men, A History of the Animators Who Defined Disney Animation, over at audibletrial.com/DCTC. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development, and among them are many Disney titles for you to choose from. So head on over to audibletrial.com/DCTC to get yourself a free title of your choosing. That's audibletrial.com/DCTC.
Grab the confetti and celebrate a Disney anniversary.
Hello, Jeremy, and welcome back to Disney Coast to Coast. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm great. How are you, Mr. DePauli?
I have one thing to say. Step right up and come on in. Here is where the fun begins. There's so much to do. Getting ready just for you. Gosh, the Disney afternoon, man.
I love that. In fact, that is one of those songs that I kind of forgot about. And then a few years ago, I stumbled across it again. Like, it just randomly started playing. I don't even know what the context. If somebody was playing it at Disney or a YouTube video or something, and I immediately had, like, whatever reverse PTSD is, I had it in that moment. Because I was like, and like freaked out and immediately went to iTunes and downloaded it. I mean, that is the siren of my childhood right there, just calling me back.
Yeah, that theme song is one of the catchiest theme songs ever written. I don't know how you ever forgot it, to be honest. But folks, in case you haven't figured it out yet, this month marks the 30th, yes, we're old, the 30th anniversary of the Disney afternoon, which first premiered on September 10th, 1990. And this TV animation block ran for approximately 7 years until August 29th of 1997. Now today, we're specifically talking about that official Disney Afternoon 7-year syndicated Disney television animation block, consisting of 4 half-hour animated shows each weekday, as some of these shows lived on either before or after the Disney Afternoon in various forms and under different Disney TV block names. But it's so funny because I do feel like so many of us, it was part of our childhood, but when it comes to TV shows, I think the general rule these days is that you shoot or record 3 seasons worth, because by the time those kids, are 3 years later, they're kind of like aged out of it or moved on. And that's so the case with the Disney afternoon, because a lot of the stuff we're talking about today, some of it, like, I remember so well. And then some of it, I'm just like, huh? Like, I don't remember this at all. So where did you land as far as like doing the research on this and kind of checking it out again?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely shows that I recall. I mean, I can tell you exactly where I was in my basement watching certain episodes. And then there's a few that I'm like, I don't know what this is, never heard of it. Or, I saw them maybe years later on reruns. Maybe because didn't the Disney Channel used to run some of these shows like 6 a.m. on a Monday through Friday kind of a thing.
Yeah, no, that's what I was talking about before when I'm saying today we're going to talk about the official 7-year block, because these shows had a kind of a lot of different lives, and even some that you think like, oh, Disney Afternoon actually existed before that on Saturday morning cartoons, and that's actually the perfect place to start as far as the history of Disney Afternoon is concerned, because, folks, I know some people have a strong opinion about this man. I praise him quite a bit. But once again, Michael Eisner, the man who made sure that this was going to be possible, because he entered the company in 1984, and one of the things that he realized was that Disney did not have any TV animation shows. And this is a guy who used to work for Saturday morning cartoons on ABC. And if you want to go on a whole other tangent, oh my gosh, Saturday morning cartoons, how I miss those. Those were amazing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, iconic. Nothing better than waking up earlier than your parents on a Saturday morning and just going into the kitchen, getting you a little pre-breakfast, just something to snack on, and turn on the TV and watching cartoons. And like, how amazing that these cartoons were really only one day a week. Like, kids today, I feel, are so spoiled that you have Netflix or YouTube or whatever, and you can watch your shows all the time. I could only watch Garfield one day a week.
I think about this constantly, and it makes me sad because there are so many things. The other one I always think of is TRL, Total Request Live, on MTV, where you used to call in to request them to play music videos you wanted to hear, because that was the only way you got to, like, get it when you wanted it. There was no going to YouTube. There was no, none of these things. And that's what Saturday morning cartoons were. Kids listening. There was a time where there weren't networks that constantly played cartoons. And these shows, a lot of shows were made specifically for the networks on Saturday mornings. It was a magical time, but I digress. Disney Afternoon, same situation. And Michael Eisner was really smart. He came to the company, and let's face it, 1984 was a time for the company where they weren't making hit features, and they didn't have a presence on TV. And he knew well enough that animation is the life of the Walt Disney Company. And even if it's not going to be the highest level of quality, obviously a feature has a much bigger timeline and budget, but still they needed something on television. And so he held a meeting on a Sunday at his house with some executives and creatives very early on in his time at Disney, and mandated that they have at least one new animated series on the air by the fall of 1985. They actually ended up having two, and they were Saturday morning cartoons. One was called The Wuzzles, which I really loved, and The Adventures of the Gummy Bears. And they were both so good, and you know what? They did it, and it changed everything. Do you remember the Wuzzles by any chance?
I do. This was like off-brand Care Bears, is the way I remember it.
And they were but they were a mix of animals. It wasn't just like a bear. It would be like a bear and a rhinoceros or whatever they were. And it was a lot of fun. I really liked them.
Weird crossbreeding, if I remember, because weren't they like half a bear, half a bumblebee? Like that kind
exactly.
Of thing.
Yes, I think it was a lion and a bumblebee, and then like a hippopotamus and a kangaroo, hipperoo or something like that. I can't even remember. I have no idea. But it was so much fun back then. And, to his credit, he knew that's what they needed, and it's great. I mean, who knows what it would have been without this. And it was a weird time for the company. And in a small way, this saved character integrity and creating new characters and such.
Yeah, this is kind of like the other side of the coin from something else that Michael Eisner did that he's kind of notorious for. And that is he started making all the direct-to-video sequels, or as they've become known, the cheapquels. And I know a lot of people have special places for some of these films in their heart, and some of them are mildly redeeming, and then others are just pure garbage. But this is definitely Michael Eisner, again, same side, or, two sides to the same coin, saying, we need to capitalize on animation. We have these classic characters that we can still make money and capitalize off of. So if you enjoy the sequels, you really love the Disney Afternoon. If you hated the sequels, you may still love the Disney Afternoon because they were different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the cool thing about Disney Afternoon was it was introducing lots of new characters, but they also did go back to some of the classics as well. It's interesting. We'll get into it in a second, but I just want to explain for people listening who maybe don't know what syndicated television is this is simply companies create shows. A lot of talk shows are syndicated. And what that means is they're not on at the same time in every territory or state or city. It's really up to the individual locations to quote unquote buy these shows to air on their network. So Disney created this syndicated block of TV. And the thing that was really interesting was it was, they were buying this 2-hour block. They weren't buying these 4 individual shows. So the way that they were presented was they had that awesome opening theme for all of them. And then after each show, you wouldn't even see like the credits for the show. It would be at the end of the 2 hours where they'd roll the credits for all 4 shows because like they looked at it as one package. And it was just kind of a unique way of doing things. And oh my gosh, super successful. I can remember this after school all the time. So good.
Yeah, and you had Mickey Mouse, who was sort of like interweaved in between the shows. So that way it felt grounded and felt Disney. I remember with a paintbrush. Yeah,
there were a lot of pitches to get a Mickey Mouse show, and at that time the company was scared because he was the company mascot, and they're like, and they still. I remember hearing Wayne Allwine, the former voice of Mickey Mouse, talk about this, and like, they're never, super risky when it comes to Mickey, and it can get kind of stale performing that voice because of that, because they're just so protective of him in particular. So they'll give the crazier stuff to Donald or Goofy or whatever. But yeah, I mean. It's such a cool block. I want to start talking about the original 4 series because these were like the holy grail of Disney Afternoon, and frankly the ones that always pop to mind first. Even though they had some great shows later, these really popped to mind. I mentioned Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears, and this show centered on 6 bears: Zummy, Gruffy, Grammy, Tummy, Cubby, and Sunny, who lived in Gummy Glen and battled the forces of evil Duke Igthorn with the help of magical gummy berry juice. As I mentioned before, this started as a Saturday morning cartoon, and honestly, I think I remember it more as a Saturday morning show than a Disney afternoon show.
I don't really remember how I remember it, but I just remember I was obsessed with this show, and still kind of am, to be honest with you. I think it's such a hidden gem amongst those kind of 80s and 90s cartoons. First off, the voice casting, incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, we can say that across the board for these shows because it amazes me the people that are still working today that were like did voices in almost every show we talk about. But yes, please continue with Gummy Bears.
Well, I mean, June, what's her name?
June Foray.
Thank you. Who was Rocky and Bullwinkle back in the day and has done a million voices. The guy who did the voice of Garfield. I mean, come on.
Yes, who sounds exactly like... Well, here's the funny thing. When Disney Plus came out, one of the first retro things I actually turned on was Adventures of the Gummy Bears. And I don't even know why. I like this show a lot, but it's not like my top 10 or anything. But for some reason... I will tell you why. I wanted to hear the theme song. And that's the thing about we talk about the Disney Afternoon theme song, but like the individual theme songs for these shows were incredible. Some of the best TV theme songs of all time, and the Gummy Bears didn't disappoint. But as I was rewatching, I was like, that is clearly Garfield as one of the bears. And it's so funny as a kid, you don't even think twice about that sort of thing. And watching it as an adult, you're like, yeah, okay, same exact voice. It's just like their attitudes or perception is different. That's it.
For sure. And, I love the folklore that's kind of behind this show. Like, you have this, like, gummy legend that is under the surface of these gummy bears, and they make this special potion. And even at times in the show, I remember they would talk about sort of like their history and the ancestry of, I think they were hidden from the human world for a reason, and they revealed themselves to a little boy who's a squire, and it takes place sort of in these medieval times, and there's an evil knight, and there's a princess. So you kind of had this whole, like, total package. There was something for everybody to enjoy.
Speaking of gummy berry juice, though, how is that not sold in the parks? That could have been the original butterbeer, man. Like, forget blue milk. I want gummy berry juice.
Do you remember the little juice things that came in like a barrel packaging? It was like plastic with like the tinfoil lid.
This sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is not sold anymore because it had like 120 grams of sugar in it. It was sugar water. But I remember,
I know. Now I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. Yes.
That was my gummy berry juice.
Yes. That would have been perfect packaging for it, for sure. I love it. Now let's move on to DuckTales. This was, once again, one of the original 4, and this followed the adventures of Scrooge McDuck and his 3 nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. It also added new characters to the Duckburg lore, including your Wegabale Vanderquack, or young Wegabale Vanderquack, Nanny, Mrs. Beakley, and pilot Launchpad Mcquack. Now, this was a big one. This was a huge hit for the Disney afternoon.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Scrooge McDuck was just amazing. I loved Huey, Dewey, and Louie. They had so many great villains as well. And it was almost one of those, almost like a Batman from the 1960s sort of villains, where you'd have a different villain each show, but some of them overlapped and would come back. I remember there was like a female vampire.
Yes.
Kind of a villain. I forget her name. But, it was just all these different villains that made it so cool. And I remember, too, Nintendo had a video game, DuckTales the video game, which they just re-released like 10 years ago. And that was so fun.
I love that they just re-released it 10 years ago.
Well, I mean, it was like,
After the time. I get what you're saying. They also, this also spun off a really great movie, DuckTales the movie, Treasure of the Lost Lamp, which was, it was kind of a good bad thing because I think it was Disney Toon Studios or something that released it, not Walt Disney Animation Studios. And it kind of it did very well. And it kind of, made the company recognize, oh, we don't have to spend as much money on them. We can make them cheaper and they'll still be successful. And like, that's shaky waters to walk on, but it's a great movie. I will say, really like that movie.
Yeah, I think it came out around the same time as The Rescuers Down Under and outperformed it. So
probably Rescuers Down Under was a major fail. So that would not surprise me whatsoever. Okay, so then we have Chippendale Rescue Rangers, Chippendale. We continue. By the way, I didn't even mention, but the theme song of DuckTales, ooh, I mean, talk about classic. There we go. Chippendale Rescue Rangers, same thing. Originally intended to center on a team of crime fighters led by a mouse called Kit Colby. The concept eventually evolved to focus on veteran Disney chipmunks, Chippendale, and their teammates Gadget Hackwrench, Monterey Jack, and Zipper. Now, oh my gosh, as a kid, I remember seeing these characters in the parks like nonstop to the point that I was like, when can I just see good old Chippendale? Like Chippendale Rescue Rangers was everywhere when I was a kid.
Well, it was the coolest show. I mean, DuckTales was great, Gummy Bears was great, but to me, the epitome of cool was Chippendale because you had the Indiana Jones sort of vibe. You had the comedic timing of Dale. You had Gadget, who was like a powerful female who fixed stuff. Monterey Jack, who was always, he was like the slob, but he always came in at the nick of time and saved the day. And also great villains in this as well. The one fat cat. So fun. What a great show.
Did you know the voice of Dale? Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name. But he is the ghost host in Haunted Mansion Holiday.
Really? Oh.
Cory Burton, that's the name.
Cory Burton, okay.
Yeah.
Cory Burton, another voice of a million characters. I think he did like the knight, the evil knight in Gummy Bears. And...
It wouldn't surprise me. It's funny, I was looking through some of the credits as I was researching these, and the same names kept popping up. Cory Burton, Jim Cummings, like June Foray. It's wild. Employed by Disney, these folks, so crazy. But yeah, Chippendale Rescue Rangers. So that was probably your favorite one then of that original year then, huh?
I mean, Gummy Bears was hard to beat.
Okay.
But Chippendale Rescue Ranger, I mean, DuckTales too. It's hard. It's like asking me what my favorite child is.
These are your children?
These are my children.
Fantastic. And now, so those three shows, those were shows that were kind of tested and performing well and became part of the Disney afternoon. But the first original created specifically for the Disney afternoon was Tailspin. And this utilized many characters from the classic film The Jungle Book to tell a new story set in the 1930s era city of Cape Suzette. Baloo the Bear was cast as a pilot whose air cargo business is taken over by ambitious businesswoman or business bear Rebecca Cunningham. He takes on young Kit Cloudkicker as his navigator and faces off with a variety of air pirates. Now, this one was interesting because you get, Baloo and stuff like in the movie walked on his 2 feet and stuff like that. But they took characters like Shere Khan and did the whole, what's it called when they put him in clothes and anthropomorphic? Yeah.
Yeah.
They did the whole Zootopia sort of thing and Robin Hood where they're in clothes and walking on 2 feet. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You're taking these classic characters that we've never seen this way and completely changing it up. And once again, another great theme song. Oh, those first 4, the theme songs were so good.
So good indeed. In fact, I should have looked this up. I don't know who wrote them, if it was the same person. If
it's hard to find out. It's actually, I did try to find out, and they're not very clear about who wrote these and who, like a lot of times they'll say like the Disney Afternoon Choir sang them. I'm like, well, that's helpful. You know, like who are these people? But yeah, it's so good. And by the way, you had mentioned you bought it on iTunes. There is a full album. In fact, I wish I didn't get rid of it. I had the cassette of all of this music, and not only the Disney Afternoon theme song, but all the TV show theme songs have like full-length versions of them. Of course, they're cut way down for the opening credits of the show, but you can buy this on iTunes still today, I believe. It's just called like the Disney Afternoon album, and I highly recommend it. Like so good. So, you know.
Have you watched Tailspin recently?
Yeah, I did. I popped it on recently to watch for this purpose.
It's funny to me as like a kid, I thought Rebecca was the worst. I mean, she was always just nagging and always like trying to ruin the fun. And then I watch as an adult and I'm like, I'm on her side. Baloo is out of control. He needs some discipline.
I mean, she was just a responsible adult character, right?
And she had a business to run. She's a strong, independent woman trying to raise a child. Come on.
But let's talk about the fact that, like, there are several characters in these shows that are strong, independent female characters, which is something like we talk about all the time today, right? Where, you know, people are always saying we need more of those sorts of role models and all sorts of entertainment. But let's just throw it back to 1990 for a second, where the Disney Afternoon was doing that. It's kind of awesome.
For sure. And I think that's why our generation perhaps is a little more progressive in our thinking, because look what we were raised on.
Giving me a Disney Afternoon. Ba-dum-bum. So those were the original four. We move on from there, and what would happen was every year throughout these 7 years, they would kind of shift them where it's kind of like the oldest show would get dropped off. They'd bring in a new one, so we'd lose stuff. But here are some of the new shows that we did get. Darkwing Duck. This was a really popular show. This is about a bumbling superhero who battles crime with the help of his daughter and pilot sidekick. Of course, the character's name is Darkwing Duck. And the interesting thing about this is Launchpad Mcquack is in this from DuckTales. Is that right? There's like a crossover.
It is, yeah. Yeah, so he appears in both. I think there's an explanation at some point as far as how, but I don't recall. But I do remember reading that they originally wanted Launchpad to be the leading man of this show, and he was supposed to be like a James Bond type. I think it was going to be called Double O Duck, is what I read.
Oh,
but the James Bond estate, I don't know who owns it. They own the Double O name, so they couldn't use that. So instead,
wait a second, Double O anything?
I believe so.
Problematic?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so they created an all-new character, decided to make Launchpad the sidekick. So that way he could maintain some character integrity. He's always been kind of the bumbling idiot. So it would have been hard for him to be a leading man and be taken seriously. But Darkwing Duck, what a great show. If you love superheroes now, no doubt you loved Darkwing Duck back in the day.
Now, it's really interesting that even back then they were doing like crossover stuff with the show, which honestly, as a kid, I never really connected the two. I didn't watch Darkwing Duck a ton. I knew the character much more than I knew the show. And I do think it's a very cool character. In fact, I think this is the first character for Disney that Jim Cummings actually like created an original voice for. Up to that point, you know, he was matching a lot of voices. And so this is, you know, the first one for him, which is pretty cool. I mean, Jim Cummings, huge in the world of Disney. And, you know, Darkwing Duck, people love it. People go crazy over this one. And this was a fun walk around character in the park back in the day as well.
Yeah, I wish they would still bring him out from time to time, more often than what they do.
Yeah, he needs to be, you know, they just need to do, we're going to get to the theme park stuff later because, oh my gosh, there was some special stuff. But then we got another great one, Goof Troop. Oh my gosh. And I learned something that I didn't know, that the name of this show was actually because it was originally intended where Goofy was like a camp troop leader. And it strayed from that original concept, but they still liked the title Goof Troop, even though it made much less sense. But I'll tell you what, I never questioned it as a kid.
Same. Never. I mean, maybe it's just because my mom, whenever we'd go somewhere, she'd be like, come on, troops, and we would just go, me and my brother and sister. But how interesting.
This classic Disney character, Goofy, is a single father raising his son, Max, in Spoonerville. Pete, a frequent antagonist from the old cartoons, lives next door with his family. And I really liked this. I liked that Pete was part of this and, still giving trouble for Goofy. And it was just, and Max, what a great, is this the introduction of Max? Had we never met Max before this?
So Max actually debuted in some of the shorts, I think, back in the 50s, where he was just described as like Goofy Jr. But I think this is Max Goof actually getting his identity as Max Goof. And also, Goof Troop, Max is a lot younger than what he is in what probably most people recognize him from, which is a Goofy movie, which was obviously sprung from this TV show. Yeah,
so he's like in high school in the movie, and in this he's definitely considerably younger. In fact, voiced by a woman on Goof Troop and Jason Marsden in a Goofy movie. And then, of course, there was the sequels. So this was pretty huge for Goofy, the character. He kind of before this was always a sidekick, I feel like. I could be wrong on that factually, but I feel like that's the case. And now he was really like the star of his own show. And Bill Farmer always talks about, this was like a game changer for the character. It was the biggest thing he had done with the character at the very least. And at that point, he would have been doing it for probably about maybe a little under a decade, which is actually kind of scary to think about. It was that long ago. Oh my gosh.
Can I give a little plug here real quick?
Sure.
If you are a fan of a Goofy movie, on my podcast, The Mad Chatters, we talked to Kevin Lima, who was the director of a Goofy movie, and Jason Marsden, who was the voice of Max, as mentioned earlier. And we did this back in April when it was the 25th anniversary of the movie. Check out that interview. One of my favorite things we've ever done.
Jason's done a lot more Disney stuff than people realize. In fact, I learned something doing research for this about, I'll skip ahead to this one. The Schnookums and Meat Funny Cartoon Show. Now, this was one I had never, ever even heard of. Let me just read the synopsis. This animated series is actually about 3 different cartoon scenarios. The first, Schnookums and Meat, involves a dumb pair of animals, Schnookums the cat and Meat the dog. The next, Pith Possum, Super Dynamic Possum of Tomorrow, is a spoof of the 1966 Batman TV series with Pith Possum and Obedia fighting crime in Possum City. Finally, Text Tin Star, The Best in the West, is a parody of Western serials involving the title character, a cowboy, and his team. The end of each episode ends in a cliffhanger for next week, not unlike the serials of Rocky and Bullwinkle. This felt like it belonged on Nickelodeon. And the reason I mentioned is Jason Marsden did the voice of either, I can't remember if it was Schnookums or Meat, but he's the voice of one of them. And I was like, oh, another Disney credit I was unaware of for him.
I think it was only like 13 episodes.
13 episodes, yeah.
It felt like they were trying to do like Ren and Stimpy, but still be Disney, but still try to be like cutting edge and edgy and get the teenagers involved. I hated it. It was kind of dumb. I literally watched it for the first time this afternoon.
Okay, I was going to say, did you remember this? Because I don't even remember this. Obviously, it was pretty short-lived, only 13 episodes, but it was on the schedule at one point, and what you described is exact. It felt like Ren and Stimpy, just less crude, I guess, and kind of an epic fail for Disney Afternoon, in my opinion, but I don't know. Then there was Bonkers. Bonkers, an out-of-work cartoon, joins the Hollywood Police Department and helps his partners. First a donut-munching stress bomb, then a beautiful blonde. And they catch cartoon criminals. And I actually think it's a really fun concept for a show. I think I had kind of aged out of Disney Afternoon at this point, so I wasn't ever super into it, but I definitely remember the character. I just don't remember the adventures so much. But I don't know, were you watching at that point?
I remember watching it, but it never was one of my favorites. I remember the character had like a really long tail. Do you remember that?
He was like orange and spotted. I think he was a cat, right?
Yeah, like a leopard, maybe.
Yeah.
Something
like that.
It always felt like a poor man's Roger Rabbit.
It does have that. Well, it does take place in Toontown, right? Or at least he's a cartoon. So they live in a cartoon world, and he's like a retired or failed cartoon. And so, yes, it does have that feel to it. It may have even, what year would that have been? Let me think. That may have been in response to the fact that at that point, maybe Disney couldn't do any more with Roger Rabbit because of all the lawsuits with Spielberg and stuff. And this may have been them trying to make a new Roger Rabbit. That's a very good point, maybe.
Could be. Did he ever appear in the parks or anything? Do you remember?
I do think that there was a costume of him. I feel like I've seen one. And the other thing that was interesting, I watched the pilot episode recently, and like the Mad Hatter is in the episode. And so like they apparently brought in some classic Disney characters, and they got a very good voice match to do like that Mad Hatter voice. And to me, those felt like kind of sacred characters. I'm like, oh my gosh, you just threw them in a Disney afternoon show. Like, it was surprising. I don't know how much they did that on the show. I've only really seen that one episode, or at least remember that one episode. But still interesting, the fact that they did that, I thought. Okay, now let's talk about a show that, gosh, talk about dark. This was a dark show for the Disney afternoon. It's called Gargoyles, and it was about a clan of heroic night creatures who pledged to protect modern New York City as they did in Scotland 1,000 years earlier. I mean, dark. That's the word I'll say.
I never got into this show. I remember watching a few episodes because that's what you did. It had the same feel as like the Batman animated show back in the day.
A very superhero feeling. Absolutely. So this is an interesting period, right? It's kind of like Disney chasing something. It kind of reminds me of today, maybe a little bit, where Disney's not happy with like the girl princess brand. They're like, no, we need Pirates of the Caribbean. We need Jungle Cruise. We need these things to get like young boys interested. And that's kind of what it felt like. Or we need to buy Marvel because we don't have that demographic or something. And it felt like they were at these crossroads of, okay, Nickelodeon's taking some of our audience. Let's do a show similar to that to bring them in. Or, WB is taking some of these comic book fans from us. Let's bring them back to Disney and create something like Gargoyles. And that's 100% what it feels like to me.
Yeah, one of those that I feel like adults could watch as well and still really enjoy because of the undertones of the show, while kids enjoy it just because it's, cool fight scenes. But very dark, didn't feel like it matched up with the rest of the afternoon lineup. And it always kind of felt odd to me when they would do like commercial spots or whatever where all the characters were kind of hanging out together. And so you had... Scrooge McDuck and Baloo and Goliath.
Yeah. I think that they should redo this show with the same series dark tone, but instead use the gargoyles from Hunchback of Notre Dame instead. And let's see what we get. I mean... Yeah,
well, this show looks like... What year did it come out? 94, 95? And Hunchback was 96, so... Gargoyles were all the rage in the mid-90s at the Disney company.
There we go. So straying away from that Disney brand into these different genres, we head back to classic Disney with a show like Aladdin, the animated series. Now, of course, we all know Aladdin, that clever hero from Agrabah, and he continues his adventures with the help of his fiancée, Princess Jasmine, his pet monkey, Abu, magic carpet, Iago, the greedy parrot, and of course his best friend, the semi-cosmic genie. Now this is where now we're talking like movie sequel territory. Listen, the whole concept with these shows was from the beginning that Michael Eisner was like, listen, we can't cheap out with these, but clearly they cannot have the same budget or timeline as a feature. So they're going to be much cheaper than that. In fact, I think the average was about $250,000 an episode for these shows, but they still had to be good or better than what everybody else was doing on TV. But here's the problem. When you take something as classic and epically beautiful as Aladdin, and then say, let's put the cheapo Disney version out, or TV version out rather, like, that's a problem in my book. I don't like it when they screw around with the characters this way. Just not a fan.
For sure. You lose a lot of the integrity of the characters in the storytelling, because now you have Iago is a good guy, and... Yeah,
like, I always hate that too, and there might be a good reason for it. I don't know the show well enough to know, and I'm sure they justify it somehow, but like, whenever the storylines conflict, I don't know. Or if they have to stretch it way too far for it to make sense, I'm just like, I don't know, man. Plus, I'm sorry, like, Dan Castelletta, I think is how you pronounce it. I could be saying that name slightly off, but the voice of Homer Simpson took over the voice of the genie in this, and the man's brilliant, but it's one of the worst voice matches I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, it doesn't quite add up at all. And he did it for one of the films too, right?
I believe so, yes. I think he did it for the first video sequel. Disney and Robin Williams had a shaky relationship at one point. Even though Robin Williams eventually became a Disney legend, there was a point where he disassociated himself with the company because I think they were like, he felt he was being overused to sell the movies like Robin Williams in Aladdin or something like that. So for one of them, you're right. He didn't do the voice. And he did eventually come back for some of the direct-to-video things. But the TV show was always Dan doing it. And, I mean, listen, who can live up to Robin Williams, right? Like, it's a tough ask. But the voice match is difficult. And I even remember watching the Spectro Magic Parade at Magic Kingdom and being like, oh my God, Genie sounds horrible. And sure enough, it was the same. And it's like, it just doesn't sound like Genie. I think one of the worst today is Sebastian. Oh my gosh, talk about a horrible voice match in that ride. I just can't even handle it. But,
you mean you can't just pick any person with a Jamaican accent and say, that's Sebastian?
No. But the absolute worst is Captain Hook in Peter Pan at Magic Kingdom, where it's just like, help me, Mr. Smee, help me. I'm like, did you even try? Unbelievable. Anyway, so obviously I have a thing about voice matches. I apologize.
But the thing with these shows, too, is you have very limited storytelling from what I can see. And that is, we all know the story of Aladdin. We know it's a happy ending. And then so to continue that in a non-theatrical sort of way, it's hard to make the adventures too exciting or too threatening because then you're sort of retroactively taking away from some of that story. So, for instance, Aladdin and Jasmine are engaged. I don't think they're ever going to break up in the TV series because that would totally, cheapen the original love story of the film.
I mean, you never know. They could. There could be some other street urchin who Aladdin finds and just like, sorry, princess, I'm over this prince life. Moving on. It's the lost episode.
Could you imagine how angry everybody would be? Like Aladdin and Jasmine split in the animated version or series.
Well, it's always for me, I'm always just like, is this canon? Is this official canon? I mean, it is the Walt Disney Company making this show. So is it official canon? And to me, the answer should always be yes, it is, because it's us making it. But at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I just always go back to the original source.
I don't want to believe that Iago redeems himself. I don't want to believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Gilbert Gottfried was thrilled for the continued work, but it's a bizarre change of, the whole character integrity and character, just his outlook on life has completely changed. So I don't know. Maybe it was just Jafar who was making him a jerk the whole time. Maybe without Jafar, he's just a good guy who just wants to live on in a tiki room and have nobody bother him until somebody burns the place down and, they kick him out of there. Maybe that's all he wants, man.
Well, who am I to judge?
Hashtag canon. That's canon right there. Let's continue on this, cheapening the originals and go to Timon and Pumbaa. The further misadventures of the lovable warthog Pumbaa and his meerkat buddy Timon from The Lion King. I mean, I didn't even know these characters were that popular, to be honest. Obviously, a study must have been done that was like, hey, Timon and Pumbaa are like the rock stars of The Lion King. Let's make a spin-off show. I mean, give me a hyena show. That would have been the one I would have watched. Just kidding. But
I mean, yeah, but very popular because they got their own movie as well, The Lion King 1.5, which was told from their perspective, and then their own
direct to video, right?
Yeah. But still, my thing is, at the end of Lion King, Timon and Pumbaa are living happily with Simba at Pride Rock. That's enough for me. I don't need them to go back out into the wilderness and to become what they used to be, which I really feel like is what the TV show was. Because I remember just very few episodes of this.
Yeah, I was definitely aged out at this point. It might have been background noise, but Once again, the same feeling as Aladdin. I don't touch the classics, in my opinion. I get it. It's a built-in audience right there, but I just don't think it's a smart move for the company. But I'm probably wrong. They probably sell a ton of toys off this and can continue keeping these characters in the parks for longer periods of time because, but I'm sorry, like, I'll go see Festival of the Lion King just because I'm a fan of the Lion King. I don't need the Timon and Pumbaa series to get me in that door. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, it's two things. You said don't mess with the classics. At this time, they weren't classics yet. They'd only been out for maybe a year or two, and then all of a sudden now they have a television show.
Fair enough, but I will argue that Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King were all immediate classics. Like, immediate. I would argue that. The box office was telling enough. The Academy Awards, or at least nominations, were telling enough. Like, these are classics. So, but I get what you're saying.
But then also, if I'm a parent and Lion King came out in 94, and then I have a baby in 94, and that child is now 3 years old in 97, sure, they may have seen the movie, but they're also watching the TV show. So for a lot of kids, these TV shows were really their first introduction to these characters.
Yeah, quite possibly. And, therefore, when they see them in the parks, they know who they are. I get it. I just, for me, it comes down to canon and just visual quality. They cannot look the way that the movies do. And it's a choice that's made. I get it. Whatever. Moving on.
There's some fun comparisons of animated feature versus animated television show or sequel. And you can just see the cheapening of the animation and the drawings. If you ever want to Google that.
Yeah, and listen, they're still really good. Like, I'm not saying that these shows don't look good. It's just, I mean, I believe even the amount of frames per second are like cut in half when it comes to a TV show. I think, for a feature, they're doing 24 frames per second, which is typically how you shoot a film. And then I think for these shows, they do something like 12 frames per second. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that, to cut down on the amount of drawings that actually need to be done, and they ship them overseas to be done. It's interesting. But there was Quack Pack, The Misadventures of Donald Duck and His Rebellious Teenage Nephews with Attitude, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Now, this is the first time I remember hearing Huey, Dewey, and Louie with, like, not the traditional voices. They sound like teenage boys. Of course, they're voiced by girls. In fact, as I was listening, talking about like voice matches, we were talking about Garfield earlier. I was listening to that and I'm like, oh, that's Tommy Pickles from Rugrats, isn't it? And I look it up and it is indeed Elizabeth Daily, who used to go by E.G. Daily. Now she's going by Elizabeth, I guess. And she did the voices for both. So I was like, yep, okay, one of the ducks is Tommy Pickles now. But
nailed it.
Yeah, so they, more adventures with those guys, which is cool. Those are great characters. I think that they're awesome, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. So it's fun to see them age kind of like Max did, from a Goof Troop to a Goofy movie.
Yeah, and Donald is a different sort of antagonist to them than Scrooge McDuck was. So you could still have the sort of similar shenanigans with similar results, but the characters still felt fresh.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of shows... I've heard this argument a lot of times from people at Disney who are like, we can't have a show that really where Donald is a short, sure, but like a show or a movie, to have Donald as the main character is problematic because people have such a hard time understanding him. So like Huey, Dewey, and Louie can kind of, the way they respond can clarify things. I've never had a hard time understanding him, to be honest. Like, obviously he's got a weird voice, but I've never been like, what did Donald just say? So I find that to be such a strange argument. But like, I've heard it like year after year after year that Donald is just hard to understand in the eyes of the company. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think if you lock in on it and once you kind of figure it out, it's not too difficult. But I understand their concern. And
then there was the final show of the official Disney afternoon was Mighty Ducks, the animated series, a team of humanoid duck ice hockey team / freedom fighters fight evil between games. Now, of course, this was based on, or at least the name is suggested by the very popular movie, The Mighty Ducks, which was a live action film. And also, I'm going to assume at this point, Disney owned the Anaheim Ducks hockey team as well, I believe.
Yeah, I think it all happened around the same time.
Yeah, and
I mean, you talk about grabbing a franchise and squeezing every last dime that you possibly can out of it. That's what they did to the Mighty Ducks.
yeah, this is a teenage boys show, right? Like these alien ducks are from another planet. They're playing hockey and fighting crime. Or fighting evil. It's not my cup of tea. But hey, it was a show on the Disney afternoon, and I'm sure there are people that really liked it. And perhaps people that were the right age at that time, this is what they think of when they think the Disney afternoon.
I remember watching it, and I actually remember having one of the ducks as an action figure. It was the goalie. But other than that, I couldn't tell you about it. I do know that the main character, Wild Wing, he is still the official mascot of the Ducks hockey team out there. I don't know if it's the same Wild Wing, but they share the same name.
I kind of like the design of the Ducks. So like even the team logo and stuff, it's kind of cool. So I don't know. But the Disney afternoon ended. We talked about that original block of the 4 shows, but the block that it ended with, of course, it changed throughout the years, but it ended with Darkwing Duck, Aladdin, Gargoyles, and then that 4:30 p.m. slot would rotate with Timon and Pumbaa on Monday, Quack Pack Tuesday through Thursday, and Mighty Ducks the Animated Series on Fridays. And folks, all of the shows that we talked about are available on Disney Plus if you want to check them out, except for Schnookums and Meat Funny Cartoon Show, Aladdin, and Mighty Ducks. Those you can kind of find pieces of them online. I'm sure at some point they'll end up on Disney Plus. But the one thing to keep in mind that kind of actually bothered me was all the other shows that are on Disney Plus, they weren't always in their original aspect ratio. They weren't like that square like the old television. They zoomed in on some of them and made them widescreen. I'm like, wait a sec, Rescue Rangers isn't widescreen. Quit screwing with this. Like, and that drives me nuts. I know they got in a lot of trouble about that with The Simpsons and people are upset. I don't think people care enough about these shows to go back and get upset about it, but I'm like, no. Original aspect ratio, please. Is this like black and white for kids today? If they see a square box on their TV, they're like automatically like, I don't want to watch that. It's old. I don't know.
Well, and to me, it just seems easier just to leave it how it originally was than try and get in there and tinker with it.
Totally. But I think, they just have this. Somebody thinks that people want it to fill the full screen. And I get that. Listen, this was all about, when we got rid of the widescreen, going to VHS to watch movies at home and making it that 4:3 aspect ratio and super nerdy stuff that most people don't care about, but, bothers me. So just keep that in mind. Some of the shows, not the majority, I will say, but on Disney Plus, some of them have been tinkered with a bit. But, the majority of those shows from the original Disney afternoon are on Disney Plus, which is very cool. And it's one of those things I know that a lot of people talked about when we heard about Disney Plus is put those classics on there. So we got them. So enjoy them or else they're going to take them off. So that's
for sure. Yeah. And Disney Plus also has an option for you to request things on the app. So if you really want to see Mighty Ducks, go ahead and request that. And there's a lot of other shows that weren't necessarily in this block, but I think people like confuse and associate with the Disney afternoon as well. You can request those.
Good stuff. And of course, with the success of the Disney afternoon, we had to bring them to the parks. Let's start with Magic Kingdom over at Mickey's Starland, where we had Mickey's Magical TV World. And this was a show that kind of changed throughout the years depending on what 4 shows were on Disney afternoon at the time. But gosh, I remember this as a kid. I loved this so much. You saw like a bunch of the characters from this show. Mickey was part of it. You had like a human host, and it was just kind of a fun time. I feel like originally it had more of a storyline, and as it went on, it just became kind of, hey, look, here's so-and-so sort of show, but still like really fun. And you'd get reaction from kids like you do at Disney Junior live on stage today. The Oprah reaction, the Oprah's favorite things reaction of people's heads blowing off and stuff. That's the kind of reaction you'd get from the kids during this.
Yeah, I love this. Watched it on YouTube because I was not going to the parks when I was that age, unfortunately. But amazing. So many of these characters appeared. You had both the Rescue Rangers, you had Baloo and King Louie, Darkwing Duck is there. Character after character after character. And played the theme songs as well. So.
Well, here's the cool thing about the theme songs. The characters sang their theme songs. So, like,
That's right.
You had Chippendale singing the Chippendales Rescue Rangers theme song, and you had Scrooge McDuck and Launchpad singing the DuckTales theme song. Like, I don't think you hear that anywhere else, and that's kind of cool.
For sure. And you mentioned that Mickey is in this, or at least in one iteration of it. And I always love when Mickey shows up in these kind of things because, again, you saw him during the commercial bumps, but he never appeared in any of these shows, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, they should have given him the giant paintbrush. Didn't he have a paintbrush for that opening sequence? They should have given him that in the live show. But it was really fun. I think when I saw an early iteration because I remember seeing the gummy bears in it, which was super cool. Those are characters, gosh, I wish we would see them more often. Talk about rare characters. I would love to see the gummy bears in the parks. And it's a fun show, you know? Of course, you know, Mickey's Starland doesn't exist anymore. It's part of the new Fantasyland, but still very cool. But even though Magic Kingdom did some pretty cool stuff with Disney Afternoon, I'd have to say Disneyland knocked it out of the park with Afternoon Avenue in 1991. This took over the Small World Mall area, which is like between Storybook Land Canal Boats to It's a Small World. And they just like decked it out. Now, I will say it can look super cheap because it's like made up of a bunch of flats essentially, where they made areas that looked like, you know, different places you'd know from the show, and, you know, Duckburg City Hall or Scrooge's Vault and all that stuff. And they were just painted flats, but for some reason it was really endearing to me. And they had this cool archway that looked like a bunch of balloons, but they were more firm than just balloons. And I don't know, I love Afternoon Avenue. Never got to experience the official one in person, but they did like a mini recreation of it for 90s Night at Disneyland, which I talk all about in episode 613 of Disney Coast to Coast. So check that out if you want to hear about it, because it was awesome. And my memory of this, like from childhood, was honestly a little video they did with Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen as part of the Walt Disney World Happy Easter Parade way back in the day. I guess it would have been in 91. And I just remember seeing that as a kid and being like, oh my gosh, I want to experience that. It looked so cool.
That sounds like very 90s. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen in the Disney Afternoon.
Yeah. They were very, very young at that point. So, yeah, did you know anything about this at all?
No, I saw pictures, and then again, when everybody was talking about it from the 90s Night at Disneyland, it sounds like something I would have been obsessed with if I was a child. And even though it is cheap, there's something about the Disney Afternoon that felt cheap as a whole, and in the best way.
Yeah.
So I think it works.
Yeah, it was really, and you know, the characters were there. And oh, here's one thing that was super cool. I talk about on that 90s Night episode how they gave us maps. In fact, you can see it hanging behind me right here, Jeremy. But this is just a poster on one side, but on the back side of that is a map, and it had different locations throughout Afternoon Avenue with these circles. And when you went to the location, they stamped these circles, and it would be like the logo of the show or the characters. So I have I have the map stamped, and I honestly thought this was just something cool that they did for 90s Night. And then I found out in doing some research that this was actually like part of the shtick with Afternoon Avenue way back in 91. So I was like, that makes it even cooler that I got to do it. I really wonder if they had the same rubber stamps from 1991 that they used a couple years ago at 90s Night, because that would be awesome.
Let's just pretend they did.
I'm going to say they
we'll
did.
Pretend.
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
For sure.
So, yeah, I love the fact that that was the thing. The Videopolis stage, back in the day when it was still Videopolis, I'm going to the top, Videopolis, showed a new show there called Plain Crazy, of course, titled after Mickey's original cartoon. And they did a lot of stuff. They did overlays on some of the rides. There became the Chippendale Rescue Rangers Raceway, which was a revamped version of the Fantasyland Autopia, and then Motorboat Cruise to Gummy Glen. Now, these did not get great reviews. These were cheap overlays, but I still think it's kind of cool that they did as much as they did for Disney Afternoon Avenue. Come on. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was mostly cardboard cutouts, right? Along the way.
I mean, not literally cardboard, but yes, flats of characters. And I don't care. It was cool. Listen, if they want to do a special event, like a summer-long retro celebration of this, I'd be all about it. Because what they did for one night of 90s Night was awesome enough. Like, if they full-blown did this again, I'd be thrilled. It was awesome. And, you know, we're going to talk about it in a second, but like Disney Afternoon's having a little bit of a comeback. So who knows? You never know. We might get something similar.
If we could recreate the show on the castle stage at Magic Kingdom, I would love that. Again, maybe just for one night only. I would be there.
Recreate which show?
The one from Magic Kingdom back in the day.
Oh, that show. Do it on Magic. I got you. Yeah. That'd be interesting. The Mickey's, what was it? Mickey's Magical TV World, that one.
I'm an East Coast guy, so I'm thinking about bringing 90s Night to the Magic Kingdom.
They honestly need to bring 90s Night to Magic Kingdom because it was one of the best events I've ever done at Disneyland. Like I said, episode 613, if you want to hear me rave all about that even more. Another thing that was part of this was a Disney Afternoon mini parade. It basically consisted of a float, a car that Mickey and Minnie were in, and like a school bus with a bunch of the characters. And they had the Disney Afternoon theme song, of course, with a bunch of the characters and medleys of all the different theme songs. As I've mentioned a billion times, the theme songs are probably the best part of all of this. So, yeah, just awesome all around. I would kill these days. We're doing character cavalcades in the parks currently. Like, please, just do a Disney Afternoon character cavalcade with exactly this, and I would be so happy. Oh my gosh,
it would be so awesome. It would be amazing.
Now, these days, we've seen quite a bit of current retro merchandise popping up, I would say, in the stores. So the retro Disney Afternoon thing, you know, we're celebrating 30 years now, but it's definitely a thing, I would say, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. I see Chippendale Rescue Ranger merchandise, and more than just like the occasional shirt. I'm seeing several shirts. You got bags. I know Tailspin is another one. DuckTales. And I think also they're capturing that nostalgia, but then they're also rebooting a lot of these shows and, you know, bringing in some of the classic characters into them as well.
Yeah, in 2017, we got a new DuckTales. It is a bona fide hit, and DuckTales has made reference to Tailspin, Goof Troop, and Rescue Rangers in this 2017 reboot, creating a kind of Disney Afternooniverse, which I think is kind of amazing.
And Darkwing Duck, I don't know if he's already been in it, but he's coming as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's very cool. DuckTales has been very successful this time around as well. So, hey, we might be getting another Afternoon Avenue, and I am okay with that. All good stuff.
Yeah, I love it. Even if the characters are, you know, a little updated, they don't quite look or sound like they did 30 years ago. The fact that people are being introduced to these characters again, and maybe it's causing them to go on to Disney Plus and see things that we saw when we were kids. That's amazing. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, you know how I feel about voice matching. And the reason I'm like kind of okay with it with the new DuckTales is because it looks so different. It's such a different animation style that, like, to me, they are different characters, right? Or at least different iterations of those characters. So I'm a bit more forgiving with that. But yes, Huey, Dewey, and Louie do not sound like traditional Huey, Dewey, and Louie like they did in the original DuckTales. And that can take some getting used to. But it's still cool, man. I got a great little poster of, like, advertising that show, and it has a bunch of the different characters from Disney Afternoon. So it's you know, it's exciting. It's an exciting thing that could potentially get huge again, I would say.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah, so happy 30th anniversary to the Disney Afternoon. Jeremy, is there anything you'd like to add before we get to some trivia?
No, let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Do you know the answer? Get your brain gears churning and play along. It's trivia time.
Alrighty, Jeremy, do you want to hit me with a trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
For sure, I'll go first.
Okay.
So, in my reading about the Disney Afternoon, I discovered there were a lot of shows that were pitched that never came to fruition. One of them fascinated me, and that is they wanted to take a classic animation character, give him a show the premise was he got very upset one night that he was not chosen to be in Fantasia. And as he's storming to the office of Walt Disney, he's abducted by aliens and taken to their world where they consider him a celebrity and a leader. Do you know which character it was?
Well, I would love to know where you found this research, but to me, immediately, it sounds like a very Donald Duck move a la Mickey's PhilharMagic.
It's not Donald. It's a little more obscure than Donald.
It's not Roger Rabbit, is it?
No. I'll give you another hint. This character did get a little bit of a resurgence with a Disney Junior show.
Oh, gosh. Disney Junior. How recently on Disney Junior?
Well, I think he's in it. It's Horace Horsecollar.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't he in Mickey Mouse Clubhouse? Was he in that?
Possibly. I don't know. I'm not sitting around watching Disney Junior stuff, but
yeah.
Possibly. Interesting. Where did you read that?
It was on an article by Jim Hill. So.
Oh, okay. Well, let's assume it's accurate then.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's ever steered me wrong before.
Yeah, no, he knows his stuff. So interesting. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, there was lots of interesting shows that were pitched. I know like a Thumper from Bambi show he mentioned would have been pitched.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to get Mickey Mouse in there. The people pitching these shows kept trying to get Mickey, and they kept saying, nope, now is not the time. Now is not the time. So I think a Roger Rabbit show would have been great. And I actually think that what you were thinking about Bonkers and him kind of being the new Roger, I think that's probably what happened. But
probably so.
Can you imagine if Roger had... It is interesting to me, actually, during that Mickey's Magical TV World live stage show at Magic Kingdom, like Roger Rabbit was part of it at one point because they're kind of shoving him down the throats of people at one point. And to me, it's so interesting because, like, why would kids know Roger Rabbit? Roger is in a pretty adult movie that I don't think kids are watching. And if they are, they're probably being terrified. So it is funny how they kept throwing him in kid stuff. It must have been about the shorts that he did, but...
That's how I know him. The short before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids on the VHS.
See, I think I definitely knew him from Who Framed Roger Rabbit first. But yeah, it's interesting how kids loved him. So fun trivia. But I got one for you. My question is, where today can you still find a permanent piece of the Disney Afternoon in Disneyland Park?
I believe that's Gadget's roller coaster. I forget the name of it.
So close.
My head.
Gadget's Go Coaster. Yes.
Go Coaster. Let me tell you, my first trip to Disneyland, which would have been 2014, I had lots of things I wanted to see and do and experience, especially I'd been a hardcore Disney fan for a few years at that point. But very high on that list was to go see Gadget and ride the Go Coaster. And when we rode it, I looked everywhere for traces of Rescue Rangers. And the only thing that really identifies it with that show is her portrait at the exit of the ride. Otherwise, it's just another roller coaster.
Yeah, I went a couple years ago with like a teenager, and I said to him, I was like, and this was a Disney fan, and I said, hey, do you have any idea who Gadget is? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's called Gadget's Go Coaster. Do you have any idea what that means? He's like, no. And I'm like, how about that picture on the wall, the one you're referring to? He's like, yeah, no idea. So like, there is just this kind of hidden Disney Afternoon content constantly in Disneyland that exists. And if you know it, you know it. If you don't, I don't even think you think twice about it. It's just, all right, it's another coaster.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like flies under the radar, and you hope the executives don't remember it anytime. It's like, oh, this Gadget's going to be okay. Okay, good. They didn't mention it.
I think it's safe as long as Toontown exists, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a re-theme comes at some point for it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure if they did, it would become a DuckTales thing or something. I don't know. We'll see. But it's there.
I wouldn't hate that.
So go enjoy it. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for going down memory lane with me and celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Disney Afternoon. Why don't you let folks know where they can find you before we wrap things up here?
This makes me feel old, but that's okay. You can find me and my best friend Derek. We do a little podcast called The Mad Chatters, and it's wherever fine podcasts are available. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at Mad Chatters, and we tweet all things Disney.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Now, folks, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, be sure to check it out as we talk all about the history of the Country Bear Jamboree. And don't forget that you can catch the latest Disney news in the House of Mouse headlines every Sunday. The easiest way to make sure you don't miss any of the magic is by subscribing to Disney Coast to Coast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Wherever you search, don't forget, it's Disney with a Z, Coast to Coast. And before we go, I want to give a shout out to the fantastic folks who make this show possible while also gaining rewards over at patreon.com/DisneyCTC. Thanks to Monet, Philip, Diego, Rio, Jared, Gerardo, Anna, Jeffrey, Bonnie, Faith, Leah, Jeanette, Joshua, Skylar, and Sarah. Thank you all so much. You truly make this show possible. If you'd like to join them as part of the DCTC community and gain rewards, head on over to patreon.com/DIZNEYCTC. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.